Nearly 4 years ago, we began a documentary about one of the worst natural disasters we've seen in our lifetime. In fact, we're still feeling the repercussions of that with the Fukushima nuclear power plant. That disaster, of course, is the earthquake and the tsunami that happened in the northeast part of Japan on March 11th, 2011, in a region called Tohoku. Today, I want to share with you some of the stories and lessons I learned from the people of Tohoku and how they managed to move forward in spite of their adversity. One of the most inspiring people I met was a woman named Mrs. Kuniko Suzuki, who's seen here with her husband at an emergency evacuation shelter and a high school gym in the town of Minami Sanriku. Now, Minami Sanriku was destroyed 95% by the tsunami, and 1 in 10 people were killed. So when the giant wave started approaching the town, Mrs. Suzuki started running for her life. But she's got a bum knee and wasn't able to outrun the tsunami. She soon found herself swept up in the water and the debris. But miraculously, a floating roof came by and scooped her up and took her to safety. So when I first visited her, she was living in temporary housing, very much like those FEMA barracks that we've seen in our own country's disasters, in a 2-room unit house or area with her husband, her daughter, her son-in-law, and infant grandson, a small toilet, and a little kitchenette. I couldn't believe at the time how peaceful and serene she seemed, and I wondered what her secret was. I think the secret was a Japanese concept called shikataganai, and you'll hear more about how it works and what it means. So let's go back for a minute. That earthquake in Japan measured 9.0 on the Richter scale. So you compare that with 7.8 from the most severe Nepal quake and 7.1 from our own Loma Prieta quake in 1989, and you get an idea of how big that quake really was. It wasn't the quake, though, that caused most of the damage, but the tsunami that followed. So imagine this. A giant wave of water, 10 stories high, extending 400 miles. That's the coast from San Francisco to Santa Barbara, and stretching 10 miles inland. And now you have an idea how devastating that tsunami really was. So what I'm about to show you is a picture of Minami Sanriku 2 months after the quake, or after the tsunami. This photo was taken by my photojournalist friend, Daryl Miho. And when he arrived there, he told me he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Everywhere he looked, there seemed to be total devastation. Multi-story buildings, houses, businesses, shops, all gone. We arrived there about 2 months after that, 6 months after the tsunami. And I didn't really know what to expect at first. I mean, I had seen the pictures and the video on TV and on the internet, but it turned out that it was the small things that really tugged at my heart. As we walked through the rubble, I saw a small child's tennis shoe half buried in the dirt, or a wheelchair slammed against a building. We went into one of those abandoned houses, and there I saw sofas and end tables shoved against the wall by the sheer power of the water, and kitchen cabinet doors hanging open. And in the middle of the living room was a small family photo album. It didn't seem right for me to touch it or pick it up, so I crouched next to it and looked at the pages as the wind flared them. And I realized those people would never be coming back. If they were, that precious keepsake surely would have been retrieved by now. So when we started interviewing people at that time, we were dissuaded from asking too many personal or intrusive questions. People were afraid that we would inadvertently set something off. And at that time, the shock was still so new. The residents of Tohoku were still trying to adapt to the fact that they had lost family members, their homes, their jobs, their previous lifestyles. But over the next 2 years, we went back several times, and I began to notice a change. Outwardly, it seemed as if people were adapting, And I use the word outwardly because you never really know what demons lie deep within. And I know that after the tsunami, there were many cases of suicide, depression, and even now, many, many people still suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. But among the people who agreed to be interviewed with us on camera, I noticed an inner strength and the resilience. And then it hit me. I had seen that before. There was a link to my own family heritage. It was the concept of shikataganai that made them be able to endure the darkest of times. You see, during World War II, my parents, aunts and uncles, and grandparents were all imprisoned in US concentration camps because they were of Japanese ancestry. You know, my dad was 14 years old at the time, and he and his siblings were living, in fact, here in J-Town. And it didn't matter that they were American citizens. My mother, 11 years old, Stockton, California, the same thing. So they and 120,000 other people of Japanese ancestry along the West Coast were ordered to leave their homes because the government was afraid that they were enemies or potential spies. Initially, the government didn't have housing to accommodate all those people, so they pressed into service regional racetracks and fairgrounds. My father's family was taken to the Tanforan racetrack, which is just south here of San Francisco and San Bruno. And for the next 6 months, he and his family lived in a horse stable. My dad can remember smelling the horse manure and seeing horsehair embedded in the whitewashed walls. My mom's family was taken to Gila, Arizona, and eventually transferred up to Tule Lake, Northern California. My dad's family, after Tanforan, ended up going to the Topaz Relocation Center in Delta, Utah. I could only imagine what it was like to live there in Army-style barracks for 3 years, surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. But 2 years ago, I had a chance to get a different perspective. In 2013, I visited the Heart Mountain Relocation Center because we're doing a documentary on former Secretary of Transportation Norman Mineta. Norman, at age 11, was incarcerated at Heart Mountain. And at Heart Mountain, there's an interpretive center. In there, behind plexiglass, is a replica of what the interiors of those barracks might have looked like. In a 16 by 20 foot space, I saw 5 cots neatly arranged with colorful bedspreads on them. There was a cradle in the middle of that small space, and a clothesline that hung over the wall with diapers and laundry on it. A homemade table had old 1940s Life magazines strewn on it. And in the corner by the door was a chamber pot, so that if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you didn't have to wake up, put on your clothes, and wade through the heavy freezing snow and weather conditions to relieve yourself. It hit me then. I looked at those 5 cots and I thought, Dad, Uncle Paul, Auntie Sachi, Auntie Haru, my grandparents. Now fast forward 70 years back to Tohoku, Japan, and imagine what the survivors of the tsunami and my parents' generations went through. What did it take for them to be able to move on with their lives without angerness or bitterness? How were they able to find a renewal after suffering so much terrible events? I believe the answer lies in shikataganai, which means it can't be helped or you can't control it. It's a concept that's difficult for us to understand. As kids, my sister and I would complain to our folks after school, oh, there was a pop quiz, oh, we got a bad grade, oh, the teacher's been mean. And they would look at us and say, shikataganai. But the deeper meaning of that was, you can't control that situation, but you can control how you deal with it. As Americans, it's a sort of foreign concept to us. We're so used to wanting to improve things, change things, make things better. In fact, our country is rooted in the idea of revolution. But in the Eastern philosophy, it's about balance, harmony, acceptance. And when I say acceptance, I don't mean failure or defeat or surrender. I mean the ability to accept things for what they are and make the best out of a bad situation. So not to be flip about it, but I'm going to borrow a line from a Disney movie and a popular but ubiquitous song. Let it go. Let it go. I want to leave you with one last story about the power of shikataganai. Last November, I had the chance to go back to Tohoku, show the finished documentary to people, and visit Mrs. Suzuki. Now she's still living in that temporary housing unit, and from that cramped quarters, she's able to sit there, give me a plate of cookies, offer me a napkin, get boiling water, instant coffee, and as she turned to get a China coffee cup, it shattered against the cabinet wall. And I felt really bad knowing that that might have been one of the only things that she was able to salvage from her household, or that she'd used hard-earned money to buy it. And I started apologizing profusely. And she looked at me and stopped. Shikataganai. And in that gesture and that word, I understood what she was telling me was, with all that I have endured, with all that I have experienced, it's just a coffee cup. No big deal. The power of shikataganai, her key to renewal. Thank you.